Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a really important show for you this week. We start out talking about the CDC cuts, what's happening to public health, what is behind the ridiculous non-information put out by the president about Tylenol, yuck, and how you can help make a difference. After that, we check in with teachers. How are they doing with the Department of Education being cut and what you can do to help teachers and education in America? Following that segment, we check in with the National Employment Law Center about jobs and job protections. Following that, we close the show looking at what policies would give us an actual real life better balance that lifts our economy and our families, and how you can stand up for them. We're going to jump right in with our first guest. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by a really spectacular guest, Aryn Backus, who is with the National Public Health Coalition. Woo! Welcome, Aryn. And can you share with us, what is the National Public Health Coalition?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So the National Public Health Coalition is a organization that was founded by a group of former and current CDC employees who have been affected by the layoffs within the Department of Health and Human Services this year. So myself and a few others were unfortunately laid off by the Trump administration earlier this spring, and we were just really frustrated with what was happening and wanted to do something about it, about, not just losing our jobs, but the destruction of public health as a whole. So we founded this organization, and it is committed to advocating for and educating about public health as a vital government service and the ways that it helps all Americans.
It's so important. I want to talk a little bit about what is the CDC. It's the
Hmm.
Center for Disease Control, people.
Yes.
And what is the mission on paper as the CDC was started of the CDC, or what is the mission overall of the CDC? Because we have President Trump pulling them off mission. So I want to start with, what is the actual mission?
Yeah, so the CDC exists. It's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So it
Oh,
exists to
and
help
prevention.
control the spread of diseases, but also to prevent them from occurring in the first place. So it started initially as mostly focused on infectious diseases, but as things have changed in our country, people are living longer because of these awesome scientific and public health achievements like vaccines. So we need to focus on other diseases and other health events as well. I'm sorry, my dog is coughing. Okay, I think she's good. We need to focus on other things. So we've started focusing on things like chronic disease and birth defects and injury and violence prevention. And really, the CDC is wanting to make sure that all people in the United States and around the world can live the healthiest, fullest lives possible and be safe in the places where they live, work, and play.
And even though that is the mission, that is the guidance, that is the role of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, we have Donald Trump and HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. doing the opposite. Yes, I'm slowing down
Mhm.
my speaking because it's so depressing. I mean,
It's
like,
so
what's
depressing.
happening is really depressing. For people who are following science, for people who are trained in science, for people who paid attention in elementary school, middle school, and high school, what's happening is the opposite of science and the opposite of the intention and mission of the CDC.
Mhm.
Can you give our listeners and viewers a little bit of a background on how much of a departure the current policy under Donald Trump is from the actual mission?
Yeah, so the big thing that we hear is that Donald Trump and his administration want to take CDC back to just its mission to control infectious diseases, which, it sounds good. And they want to make this, new agency for healthy America, or AHA, that will focus on chronic disease and injury prevention. But if you look at it, that's not what's happening. So they have cut a lot of the programs that focus on chronic disease, including the one that I worked in, which is the Office on Smoking and Health, the ones that focus on injury and violence prevention. Those are just gone. They're not transferring to a new agency. But they're also making CDC less safe and less able to respond to these infectious disease threats. When you think of something like COVID-19, it's not just an infectious disease, it impacts all of your health. You know, we were talking a lot during COVID about how people with chronic health conditions and older folks are more at risk to get seriously ill from COVID. So you need to be able to talk to those subject matter experts across the board. Another example is Zika, which is a big concern for a lot of people. That was actually identified by the National Center for Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities, which Donald Trump and his administration would love to see just completely disappear from the CDC. So even though that is a what we call a zoonotic disease, or a disease that comes from an animal or bug, it was first identified by the birth defects division. So what would happen if we didn't have that birth defects division? It would be a lot harder to respond.
Yeah, I mean, we really need a lot of different types of scientists with a lot
Hmm.
of different perspectives to both identify problems and
Hmm.
importantly to identify solutions. And when we look at how much of the CDC has been cut, it is definitely cutting our actual real life day-to-day public health. And can you share a little bit about the negative rippling impacts that are still ongoing to the
Yeah.
shifts that have happened at the CDC?
So, like I mentioned, you have a lot of programs that have been cut, but there's also a lot of expertise that's being lost. So, I don't know if listeners remember last month, there's the really high profile resignation of three top leaders at CDC, and they resigned over vaccine policy and information. So, that's something that's going to affect people in the long term. We know that Secretary Kennedy has a lot of um, anti-vaccine views, if we're putting it politely, and doesn't believe that vaccines are a miracle. They're one of the ways that our kids are able to live safe. Like if you think back 100 years, a lot of kids didn't even reach their fifth birthday, and now it's very uncommon for kids to die that young. So that's going to affect a lot of people if they're not able to access vaccines, if they take away vaccines. But even just, spreading misinformation from these high levels is going to have ripple effects. You might have people who have never thought to question vaccines who say, well, if the president says it's bad, then it must be bad. And um, maybe they stop trusting their doctor that that's what's best for them. You'll also see just the loss of programs. So another one that will affect people really deeply is the loss of CDC's Injury Center, who does a lot of work on drowning prevention. You might see, programs that help prevent drownings at public pools disappear, or just education for lifeguards who are supposed to protect those kids.
Yeah, and it's really important. All of those are really
Mhm.
important. Over 50% of people in America don't know how to swim. Just
Yeah,
verifying the importance of lifeguards, really
yeah.
important.
And
Vaccine,
drowning is one of the leading causes of death for young kids now.
yeah, and vaccines also prevention. As you said, many kids used to not make it to age 5. Now that's uncommon. Prevention is so important, and vaccines save lives, which bring us to the disastrous announcement of Donald Trump and RFK Jr., his HHS secretary, earlier this week, basically blaming moms for autism by erroneously and inaccurately, wildly saying that Tylenol and moms taking Tylenol causes autism. Not true, people. Actually, autism was identified in 1911. Tylenol did not come onto the market until the 1950s. The math doesn't math, but not only that, the science doesn't science. Scientific researcher after scientific researcher have found that autism is a spectrum. It's not one particular situation. And in that spectrum, there's a combination of genes, environmental factors, and more at work. There's not a single silver bullet situation happening here. And I was just appalled. Like actually appalled. Like actually
Same.
almost fell off my chair. Like
Yeah, it was a train
actually
wreck.
was like none of this makes sense even if you don't have a science background. It doesn't make sense. Like
Right.
it's not a chicken or the egg situation. If the chicken came in 1911 and the egg came in 1950, you see, like, actually, maybe they aren't connected if one came way before the other. In this case, autism came way before Tylenol. What
Yeah.
is your take on that?
It's it was a train wreck. It was a disaster, as we know. It also is just very dangerous and irresponsible for them to get up there and tell pregnant women that they should tough it out when they
What?
have a high fever or are in severe pain, especially because we do know that high fever can lead to
Yes,
a lot of problems for a developing fetus. So we
including
don't,
miscarriage.
including miscarriage, including potentially autism. So we don't want pregnant women out there thinking that they can't take Tylenol because, it might, cause their child to later develop autism. Just the science is not there.
Yeah.
And a lot of experts really disagree with what they said. And you also had Donald Trump standing up there and claiming without evidence that, the Hep B vaccine should be delayed until children are 12 years old. He also started talking about separating out a lot of other vaccines. It was just very concerning to hear people who have no knowledge about science or autism get up there and make those claims. And also, they eliminated a lot of the programs that researched autism and provide care for autistic families. So, you can get up there all you want and make these baseless claims, but then we also know that on the back end, you've destroyed a lot of support for autism research and care.
Which is ridiculous because study
Yes.
after study there too shows that early intervention
Mhm.
is key for many people with autism. I mean, it really opens the avenues for people with often quite compelling and unique ideas to be
Mhm.
part of building a better community for everyone. And so, really, it's annoying. I'm mad, people. I'm mad. What do you think
Same.
everybody can and should do to help fight back against this disaster?
Yeah, I think I know people are tired at this point of hearing that they need to call their representatives and senators, but really we're hearing from a lot of our members of Congress that they're very concerned about RFK and like might be willing to take action. I know someone in Congress just introduced articles of impeachment against him. My organization, myself, we strongly believe that RFK has to go if we're going to have any hope of changing this situation that's going on. So definitely call them. It makes a difference. I was just on the Hill last week and heard from multiple staffers that RFK is one of the main topics they get calls about. So continue calling them. And also just talk to your friends, your family members, make sure that they're not falling for any of these, misinformation, any of this misinformation, and know that they should talk to their doctor, their healthcare provider, somebody who's trusted if they have any concerns about vaccines or Tylenol or any other medical information.
Yeah, follow your doctor. Definitely not the non-science President Trump
Yes.
and the non-science HHS Secretary
Mhm.
RFK Jr., who himself said he had a brainworm. So I'm like,
Yes.
maybe that's a reason that we're
Maybe
getting
that's
some of this
a
non-science.
factor here.
I'm just saying. Just saying.
Yeah.
How can people get involved and support your new organization?
Yeah, so you can follow us. We're on Instagram as National PHC. So our organization started also under this umbrella of Fired But Fighting. So you can follow us on Instagram or Blue Sky there. Our website is in progress, but you can also learn all about us at firedbutfighting.org.
I love it. And
Yeah.
giving you hope. I mean, you're definitely started fired but fighting. You're definitely still moving forward to help lift and help America be healthy. But what's
Yeah.
bringing you hope in all of that?
I think I'm starting to see a turning point. I think a lot of moms are really fed up with what is happening. Moms, Republican and Democrat, want their kids to be healthy, and a lot of moms, the majority of moms, know that vaccines are the way to do that. So if we can get up and demand that our kids are able to be safe and they're able to be vaccinated, I think we can make a real difference.
Yeah, and definitely can and do. And I love what you said about check with your pediatrician, check with your
Mhm.
doctor, check with your OBGYN. Do
Mhm.
not check with the President of the United States,
Yes.
who is Donald Trump, or with RFK Jr.
Yes.
That is non-science happening there.
Not
But
science. They do
we
not have medical degrees
no, or science degrees.
or just science degrees to begin with.
And it's questionable whether or not they had science ever, some of the things
Yes.
that they're saying. I'm like, what is even happening here? Basic logic is being
Yeah.
defied.
Very clear to
So
me that Donald Trump has probably not been to his kids' pediatrician appointments.
yeah. Yeah, actually, that'd be a good quiz. How do you know who has been
Yes.
to their kids' pediatrician appointments? Well, what are they saying on TV? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not good. But I really, really, really love your advice for people to check with their doctors.
Yes.
It's so important. We do have the science. It is there. The science shows that vaccines are important and that actually Tylenol is very, very safe. So
Yes.
data points and more are ones that doctors are familiar with. So thank you so much for being
Yeah.
on. Thank you for
Thank you
all
so
you
much
do.
for having
Thank you
me.
to keep fighting. Thank you for
Yeah.
bringing America toward being more healthy. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on your show. It was great to be here.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, but stick around. We'll be right back with our next guest from the National Education Association about teachers and parents in education and how we can help protect it. We'll be back in a quick flash. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Ralph Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by a powerful national leader, one who we thank for championing school children, teachers, families, America every single day. Welcome to Becky Pringle, who is president of the National Education Association, also known as the NEA. Welcome, Becky.
Oh, it's so good to be with you, Kristen. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so glad you're here. We get so many questions right now from parents with back to school happening and President Trump and Republican leaders in Congress slashing funding for the Department of Education, which is having ongoing rippling impacts across America and really terrifying a lot of teachers and students. What is happening and what can people do about it?
Well, let me first of all share with your listeners something that you already know. I spent 31 years of my life teaching middle level learners, eighth graders, the wonders of science. And so as we talk about back to school season, it is palpable for me. And still to this day, I get excited. I think about those new and fresh opportunities. As a science teacher, I was always, thinking about new, exciting experiments that kind of capture my students' curiosity. And so it's always an exciting time for our students, for our parents. As a parent and now a grandparent, I still get really excited around this time. But Kristen, I'll tell you, as I talk to educators and parents and the students themselves, this climate right now that they're going back to school in, where their government is not focused on what they need, is widening gaps for all of them, but especially those who are in more vulnerable places, and is not demonstrating that it cares about our kids or our classrooms or our communities, our families who are struggling. And so this back to school season is a little somber for so many people. But as always, and you know this, Kristen, you know this, uh, educators are stepping up. They are partnering with their natural allies. Always, my parents were natural allies for me as a teacher, and they're coming together. They're finding their voice and realizing they have power in that voice to stand up and demand better for not only their own children, but for all of our children, so they can come to school ready to learn with the support and resources they need.
And it's such a tragedy that people are having to use their voices, having to spend that extra time, having to speak out on such a consistent way just to get access to accurate education. You brought up science. Science, I love science too. Science is near and dear to my heart. And recently we had, as I'm sure you saw, an assault on science in not only 1, 2, or 3 ways, but like 3 bazillion ways. That is a non-scientific number that I just used there. In particular, one of the things that really got me recently, and I'm sure got you related to science, and we don't need to talk about it that long, but is the unfounded link of Tylenol use during pregnancy to autism, unfounded, that was pushed forward by HHS Secretary RFK Jr. and President Trump. It was a creative new way to blame mothers, to further stigmatize an autism diagnosis, to stop funding real autism research. Hello, people. Autism has been shown time after time to be both a complex situation and complexly genetic. Tylenol has nothing to do with genetics. We know that. We need actually Donald Trump and RFK Jr. to go back to school to learn some science. And it just kind of shows how basic science, basic scientific knowledge is so important for everybody, including the President of the United States of America and RFK Jr., who clearly do not have a grasp on basic science, which is what drives me nuts. I have an undergraduate degree in biochem. Hello. So
I did not
like,
know that about you.
what kind of non-science is happening here? This is 8th grade level science. Tylenol is not involved. Also, the math isn't mathing. I think autism was first, identified in, I believe, 1911, and Tylenol came on the market in the 1950s. So, you can't have a problem being caused by something that happened 50 years later. So all the things are not working. They need math and science. I'm just going to say they missed 2 areas of primary education, math and science.
Math and science. I can your outrage is palpable, as it rightly should be, because when we get distracted by non-science, I don't even know what to name it, lies too. Let me just be clear about that. Those who know that that's not true have to join their voices with yours and with mine, because we know the damage it will do. And it's all part of a plan, as you know, but to shore up their plan, what they've already done to take away money from research.
Yep. And
so
from
they can give it to billionaires. We know what the plan is. And so they're trying to validate that plan by coming up with this false information. And parents who are outraged because they've spent so many years trying to make sure that we had resources in research and in a development of strategies and tools, and making sure that others are educated around it. All of that investment that our parents put into this to be undone by the president. And I don't know even what to call JFK, but from making our kids less safe, from that to vaccinations, all of that it is an outrage, and you're rightly outraged by it. But I will say this, that we, the NEA, as a union, we have to turn that outrage into action. And we know, educators always know, we have a huge sense of responsibility, but we of course can't and won't do this alone. We need strong parent voices and organizations like yours. NEA is a proud partner, and we need to enlist others in understanding what's happening and how our kids are being hurt.
Yes.
I say this all the time. I'm like, who doesn't want to feed the babies? Who doesn't want to feed the babies? Why are we talking about taking away food from our children? Why is that happening? Why are we fighting against that big, bad, terrible, horrible, really no good bill that's taking away healthcare from our families, and from our kids? But this is real, and our responsibility is make sure that we're telling real stories about real students and communities and educators and families who are impacted by these cuts, in a way that will make them less healthy, that we won't be feeding them, that it'll make them our students less prepared, that it will not help them in what we all, what we are fighting for, to make sure that all of our students have what they need and what they deserve.
I mean, it is such a devastating series of blows to our country, to our economy, to our education system, which builds the future leaders of tomorrow, to so much of what makes America a country that strives to open the avenues for everyone to thrive. What we've seen is a series of decisions put forward by President Trump and Republican leadership in Congress that close the doors to opportunity. And we're seeing that in the jobs report, with jobs access going down. We're seeing that all over the place. Vegetables are up 40% in price. I mean, it's hard. And at the same time, as you said, we've had Republican leadership stand in the way of things like access to nutritious food, which, by the way, when kids have access to nutritious foods, not only is it the right thing to do, to your question of who wants to cut kids off food, hello, don't know, don't want to know them, but it also hurts our economy. So Republican
Yes.
analysts found that for every $1 into SNAP, which is food stamps, that we actually get back as a whole, as an economy, $1.73, which is almost double. That's because we live in a consumer-fueled economy country, where it takes our consumer spending to actually make our economy move. And when you take out those funds so people can't get food, they can't pay the grocery store, they can't pay the farmer, they can't, the domino effect down the line is pretty intensely bad. So what can people do other than, I kind of want a campaign to make every Republican leader who voted for this big, horrible, awful bill, they need to go back to 8th grade science, social studies, and many other, all of the topics. Just let's have them go back to 8th grade. Other than that, what can people do to help? And I just want to share with our listeners, parents and teachers are very much on the same page here. Many teachers are parents, many parents are teachers, and we're all together in this big mess. So what can we do to support one another?
Well, first of all, even as yeah, it is a big mess. And it's dangerous, it's scary, it's very, very real. But we have to understand that we cannot lose hope. We cannot ignore that throughout history, the power of organized people will always win if they come together, and they will win over the power of organized money. We have to remember that. History teaches us that. And so we have to understand that even in these dark times, we have power and we can do something. And not only, and Kristen, I say this all the time, it's not only about fighting against this horrible, evil, just terrible attacks on everyone. You can't just fight against that. We do have to do that, but we can't only do that. We've got to fight forward in a way that even as we're fighting against that, we are continuing to stay focused on the vision of what we want it to be. And so when we say that every student will have access to a high quality public education, that every family can support themselves and provide for their families, that every worker can do that, that everyone deserves respect and inclusion, to be seen, and the opportunity to see others, to learn the complete true history of this country, then we actually mean every. And so for us to do that, let me tell you what I've been saying to our educators in the NEA and everyone, and now it's you. I need everyone every day to wake up and think, what am I going to do today? And so I've made it really, really narrowed it down, Kristen. And what I say is I need you to focus on 7 verbs. Now, I taught science. I did not teach English, but we all know, well, some people know that verbs are action words. They're action words. Okay? So 7, educate. We all need to take our responsibility in that. We know as educators, we have an outside responsibility, but our parents and community members, we have to educate folks on what you just said. Everyone should know what you just said and be able to talk about it. And one of the things that we have done at the NEA is we take, when I talk about $186 billion cut from the SNAP program, who knows what billion is? Nobody, well, some people do, but not us. And so we broke it down. So we have a map that breaks it down state by state, and then congressional district by congressional, so that you can talk to people in that community and say, this is how many kids are going to lose the access to foods and healthy meals. And by the way, even if your kid is not one of them, they might be sitting in the classroom next to somebody who hasn't eaten. And we know that impacts the entire classroom. So educate. We need to communicate with each other. Just like we're doing now, but having those one-on-one conversations with everyone. We need to organize. We need to mobilize. We got to come together and show our collective strength. We, of course, at the NEA and other places, we have to litigate. We have brought cases and we won them. Not that this administration is following the rule of law or anything like that, but we have won them. Fighting back their total vilification of diversity, equity, inclusion. So litigation is another verb. We have to legislate. So even though that big, horrible bill passed, we have to hold those people who voted for it accountable. We've got to know it and hold them accountable. And then finally, we have to elect. We have to elect people at every level of government who care about our kids and care about our communities and care about this country and its democracy. So 7 verbs every day. What are you going to do? I invite everyone to join us. Go to nea.org/protect, where you can learn about all of these issues, how you can take action, how you can join that community of folks, educators, parents, the students themselves. Oh my goodness, they make me so proud. The students themselves. Rise up now in this moment. Fight back, yes. Fight forward, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Becky Pringle, NEA. Please, everybody, join, support, get involved, stay involved with the NEA. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kristen.
We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. Next up, we're talking with the National Employment Law Center about employment laws under attack by President Trump's administration. What? Why? Who? Where? Find out in a quick flash. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao-Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We're joined by a very special guest today, Mimi Whittaker, who is with NELP, the National Employment Law Project. Welcome, Mimi.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're on. Employment law, so important. So many things happening. So much I want to talk about, including maybe later about jobs reports. Ooh, but right now, I would like to dive into an explanation from you of what is happening with Donald Trump's Department of Labor stripping home care workers from the Fair Labor Standards Act. So first, can we talk about what is the Fair Labor Standards Act? I want everybody to know.
Sure, yeah. So the Fair Labor Standards Act is the law in the US that provides for minimum wage and overtime rights. And it also has a lot of requirements that allows you to see your paycheck and know what hours you worked and things like that. And so it's a really important right for all workers in the US for making sure that they get paid at least the bare minimum wage and have entitlement to these important information that helps them enforce their own rights.
And so this is a basic law for basic fair labor standards. And all of a sudden, we have the Department of Labor under Donald Trump wanting to strip out home care workers from it. What is happening? That makes no sense. It's illogical and also, by the way, wrong. What's happening?
I mean, illogical and wrong is totally the right words to be using right now. I think it's important for folks to know that this fight is coming out of a really, really long battle that has been going on for decades and decades, because originally, actually, when the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed in the 1930s, Congress excluded a lot of workers, including domestic workers, as a result of a compromise that was made with certain legislators who did not want to give mainly Black Americans the right to have the same wage protections that the rest of workers have. And so the way that they did this is that they ended up excluding these sectors of the economy where Black workers primarily were dominant. So that's why we had originally included agricultural workers and domestic workers, which includes home care. And so because of this racist exclusion, home care workers were not covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act until around the 70s, when Congress tried to correct this by including domestic workers again in these basic rights. But in doing so, they left this teeny tiny exception that was meant to cover sort of like a babysitting situation where somebody is, with somebody else in the home, but it's really just to kind of keep them company and not do actual work. And that's because the home care industry as it is now did not exist at the time. And so since that time, the home care industry has become a huge, huge sector of our economy. It's the fastest growing jobs in the US right now. And And all these big businesses have really taken advantage of this exception to deny workers the very basic minimum of $7.25 an hour. And so it took lots of advocacy to correct this and get those workers included, which happened in around 2013. And after all of that battle and the workers have been covered for around like over a decade now, they're trying to undo all that progress and turn back the clock to where we were a long time ago. And like you said, that's both illogical and wrong.
Illogical and wrong. What can people do about it?
Well, it's important that folks are aware that this is what they're trying to do, and really think about this in the context of all of the massive cuts to Medicaid, which is where a lot of the dollars for this industry come from. And so I think that it's time that folks make sure that both the Trump administration and this industry is being held accountable for what they're trying to do, and they can do this by making sure that their own state laws are inclusive of home care workers. Even in states that have a minimum wage higher than $7.25, they might have their own exclusions for home care workers. And so home care workers would not be entitled to pay the minimum wage in those states, even if that state has a higher minimum wage. So it's important that folks make sure that domestic workers and including home care workers have rights in their state now that the federal government is trying to roll back those rights.
What would be the steps to do that? I hear everybody, I hope they're on their edge of their seat saying, oh yeah, we definitely should do that. So like, what would be the steps to dive in to help do that? Would they join an organization? Would they call their state elected leaders? What should they do?
Yeah, so I think that folks should call their leaders and make sure that if they are a state that doesn't have those protections for home care workers, that they get those protections as soon as possible, because it's likely that the Trump administration is going to take those away very soon. And if for folks who are home care workers, they should join organizations. There are many unions that represent home care workers like the SEIU, and there's other organizations like the National Domestic Workers Alliance that also does a lot of advocacy for home care workers, and they should plug into those organizations, and if folks are interested in volunteering, also see what other opportunities exist.
Yeah, for sure. So what else is happening with employment law right now that everyone should know about? We had the jobs report come out showing that there are fewer jobs. What's happening?
Well, a lot of the issues in the home care industry in particular stem from the fact that they are not good jobs. They pay very low, they're very demanding, you have to work lots of long hours. And so a lot of reasons there's been shortages in the home care industry is because they have difficulty finding and keeping workers in these positions. And so it's important that when we think about why are there not jobs, we think about like what is, the quality of the jobs that we're offering, because that is the reason why there's been difficulties in the home care industry, for example, in filling those jobs. And then we can also think about, all of the other policies that affect employment law. So for example, as we all are aware, there has been massive amounts of immigration enforcement at workplaces, and that has had a really big chilling effect on folks, going to work and, showing up in their jobs. And we also know that that is really disruptive to workplaces when folks are disappeared one day to the next. It's really difficult, for everybody else who is there at the workplace to continue on the next day as if nothing had happened. It's very disruptive to our economy, and a whole host of other policies. I mean, this deregulation of the home care industry was just one of over 60 proposed deregulations this summer. So imagine taking away home care rights or taking away employment rights for home care workers like times 60 is sort of like the impact that the Trump administration is having right now on our employment law sphere. So truly there have been a lot of changes going on, and we really need to make sure that all workers have access to good jobs so that we can keep our economy running.
So true. And one of the things that study after study shows is that with an increased number of jobs being, quote, handled, end quote, by AI, one of the areas of the largest job growth actually in the United States of America, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in upcoming years is home care workers, child care workers, care workers in general. You really can't have an AI replace a care worker. And so to have Donald Trump's Department of Labor undermine that job area by taking away basic workplace rights, basic pay rights, really undermines our labor force as a whole and undermines our economy as a whole. One of the things that we see, and we were talking about this with another guest, is that our economy right now, for better or worse, is run on consumer spending. And so if we undermine our labor protections about basic things like minimum wage, then people don't have funds to spend in the local grocery stores, the local restaurants, the local shoe stores to get shoes for their kids when their kids' feet grow bigger, and all of that, which is what actually makes our economy stronger. And in fact, in the opposite, what we've seen is that in cities that have passed increased labor standards, increasing the minimum wage, etc., offering paid sick days or earned sick days, that actually the economy has increased and boosted as well, because people pretty immediately start spending that money locally in the economy. So we have proof through actual different sets of policies that having fair labor standards, and which includes livable minimum wage, say that 5 times fast, increases the economy, whereas undermining those decreases the economy. Why do you think, despite that economic data, Republicans like Donald Trump are going after fair labor standards?
It's pretty clear that a lot of these deregulations are sort of handouts to these big industries like home care. The home care industry celebrated this deregulation, and even the way that this regulation was written, you can see that the Trump administration references all of the benefits to employers and companies that they'll get from, cost savings, whereas they don't really consider the impacts that it has to the workers, but also our overall economy and the people who receive this care, as you know. We know that the poor quality of the jobs is a big reason why we don't have enough workers in this sector to fill the growing demand that there is to receive care in our homes. And so, yeah, it's clear that this is something that is going to hurt not just workers, but the people who receive the care, the overall economy. The people who really benefit are the folks who don't want to pay, these very basic protections. I mean, remember, the federal minimum wage is only $7.25 an hour. And if a business is not willing to pay that, which has happened recently, NELP was on a case where it was uncontested that the employer had not paid $7.25 an hour to workers. Just imagine, it's going to be really difficult for folks to be able to, as you say, spend as consumers and to support families and so on and so forth.
And ironically, it ultimately will undermine the business. It's penny wise and pound foolish, because the businesses, need workers, and people cannot afford to take jobs that don't have labor force protections, don't earn enough money to put food on the table. They simply can't afford to take those jobs. But also, who's going to be getting care? We have a silver tsunami, and people need to both be able to afford the care and afford to pay for the care. And it's kind of a cyclical thing. If you aren't earning enough and haven't earned enough, then later in life, you won't be able to be a part of the business that is doing elderly care. So we all need to age with dignity, and we all need to work with dignity, and we all do better when we're all doing better. And this labor policy brought to you by Donald Trump is making us all do worse, including ultimately the businesses who are profiting in the short term. What can people do? We talked about this a little bit, but do you have some specific steps right now that people can do to help turn this around? This is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's important that we protect home care workers and all domestic workers. If there are folks in specific states who do not have protections, it's important that those states get those protections as soon as possible. And then support other pro-worker legislation. I talked to, your Congress people and your other legislatures about the defunding of Medicare, because that is also going to put a really tight squeeze on states who half, because that's where this money comes from. It's public dollars, you know. So and that's where, you know, that's where a lot of these businesses are lining their pockets with. It's the public dollars that they're not paying the workers for. So talking to your legislators about making sure that there's adequate funding for folks to receive home care and to support other, you know, pro-worker policies that make sure that these jobs are great jobs. Yeah.
And how can people get involved and stay involved with NELP?
So you can go to our website. We have a lot of resources available for if you want to learn more about this issue and others. And I'd also recommend looking into the other folks who are partners who work a lot in the home care sphere. So that's, again, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, the SEIU, and also PHI is another organization that does a lot of great research in the home care sphere. So I would check all these organizations out and see what else you can learn and spread the word so that folks are really aware about what's happening here.
Thank you so much, everybody. Please get involved with NELP. Please stay involved. Please don't give up. And let's turn this country around. Thank you so much for being on, Mimi Whittaker. NELP. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. Next up, we're talking with A Better Balance. I want it, you want it, we need it. Find out how in this segment. We'll be back in just a moment. We are really excited to be joined by Elizabeth Gedmark, who is with A Better Balance. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
I'm so excited you're here because I want a better balance. I'm sure our listeners and our audience wants a better balance. America needs a better balance. What is a better balance? What does that mean?
So, A Better Balance is a national legal advocacy organization, and we believe that you should not have to choose between a paycheck and caring for yourself or your loved ones. So, we fight for better policies and we enforce laws so that you can have that balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Right now, the United States of America actually is exceptional in the fact that it doesn't have policies that allow people to build good lives, that allow people to balance having kids and working, and that really recognize that, you know, families need the wages of moms to make ends meet. 3/4 of families, in fact, need the wages of moms to make ends meet, to put food on the table, to put a roof over the heads. What policies is the United States of America exceptionally behind the rest of the world on having so that we can actually have a better balance and build lives and boost the economy?
Well, we're quite behind in a few areas. Some of the ones that we fight for, and of course, Moms Rising does as well, is that we're the only industrialized country that does not offer paid maternity leave nationwide. There are some states, over a dozen, that now provide that as a statewide program. But it just depends on your zip code, whether or not you can afford to have a baby, can afford to take time off when you are recovering from even a C-section, major abdominal surgery. We're also behind on paid paternity leave and other forms of paid family leave so that fathers can also care for their newborn babies and also so that folks can care for their loved ones who may be an elderly parent or a sibling or a spouse, even if they're diagnosed with cancer or have another medical emergency or illness, then we can't take that time that we need to that affordable time to take care of our loved ones.
Yeah, for sure. And what's interesting is these policies that offer a better balance aren't just a better balance for actual people, which is a good thing. We need actual people to have a better balance. They're also a better balance for an economy as a whole, like our national economy. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of these policies and, you know, why maybe people forget to look at how they boost the economy, not just families?
Absolutely. So one of the critical pieces of legislation that we worked on that passed a couple of years ago is the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And that law ensures that if someone is pregnant or postpartum at work and needs a reasonable accommodation, they need to drink water, they need to sit down, they can do so and they shouldn't get fired for having that need. We worked with the Chamber of Commerce and other employers who said, we want this law to pass too. And one of the main reasons for that was because they said, we need the certainty. We need to know what are our legal obligations in this sort of a circumstance. If someone is pregnant, then how do we make sure our managers know exactly what they need to do? Also, this is going to help us recruit employees. It's going to help us find people, and it's going to help us keep people. It's going to lead to happier people and employees. It's going to lead to healthier employees who are out less and don't have to quit their jobs because of a health emergency. And I use that as one example, but honestly, all of the policies that we fight for and push, paid family leave, fair and flexible scheduling, all of them have benefits to employers and have benefits to our entire economy and our and families nationwide, not just the individuals that are dealing with it.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is that having access to policies that allow people to build good lives with better balance actually increases productivity inside the workplace. We see that in study after study after study, that when people aren't like pulled in a dozen different directions, each of which are really, really, really hard at the same time, then they can perform better. So, a Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, what's in that and why is it so important that it passed? Eric, am I the one that went frozen?
No, it looks like Elizabeth froze up there. So I'll just pause this part of the recording here. You may have to restate your question there.
Oh, you
I think
froze.
we got
Are
her
you
back.
back, Elizabeth?
Yes, hi, I'm so sorry about that. I don't know how you want to deal with that. Can we edit? Is this editable?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to re-ask the question. So let's look a little bit deeper into the Pregnant Fairness Workers Act for a moment. I love this policy. I want to give it a hug. I want to uplift it. I love it so much. Can you share a little bit more about what's in the actual policy that passed?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And this passed with robust bipartisan support after over a 10-year-long fight to get it done. So before the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, if somebody was pregnant and they had some sort of a need at work, their doctor said, you really can't do any more heavy lifting now that you're in your third trimester, or even in your first trimester, I'm concerned because of that risk of miscarriages and your past medical history. I need you to do something light duty. I need you to stop lifting doing heavy lifting as much. And so the workers before the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, oftentimes they would not be able to actually receive that accommodation. So Better Balance has a legal helpline, and we were hearing from workers who would be fired or they would be pushed onto unpaid leave because the employer would say, oh, sorry, we just don't accommodate anybody. We can't do that. We're not going to work with you. We're concerned about it being a liability. Sometimes it would be more blatant with things like, we think you need to go home and take care of your baby, more overt forms of discrimination. And not in all of those circumstances, but in many of those circumstances, courts were finding it perfectly legal because the previous legislation that is still, of course, in effect, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, was really based on saying, well, look at how you treat some of your employees and you need to treat your pregnant employees the same. And the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act said, it's going to be really hard to find those folks that are getting light duty in the first place. It's going to be hard to find the people that need restrictions. So instead, you don't need to find somebody else. You can just have a proactive right to stay healthy and get what you need when you're pregnant and postpartum. And that's exactly what the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act does.
And it had bipartisan support because it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Because guess what? Not only are 3/4 of moms in the labor force, but the labor force needs moms so that we don't have empty positions, supply chain disruptions, and companies who can't do business because they don't have enough employees. So when we push moms out of the labor force, when we push pregnant people out of the labor force, then our economy loses out. Can you talk a little bit more about how the Republicans supported this, how there was bipartisan support, and why? And listeners and audience, this bill was passed under President Biden. So for context, in an even bigger way, this is a bill that was passed under President Biden. It wasn't passed more recently. But let's hear what happened with the bipartisan support. Why did Republicans support it?
So Republicans really did see that, first of all, there was a health component to this, that you have pregnant workers. And so in terms of maternal and infant health, If you can keep people healthy and on the job and able to follow their doctor's orders and not rushing to the emergency room because of something that happened at work because they didn't even know they could request accommodations, then obviously that is not going to be good for our maternal and infant health public crisis. And then also exactly what you were mentioning, that employers and the Republicans were able to see this, as well as, of course, the Democrats, that we really need this to increase women's workforce participation. Women's workforce participation has been going up and up and up, but then it's kind of plateaued and even times gone down, especially during COVID. And certain states have low women's workforce participation. And so especially a lot of the members of Congress from some of those states were saying, how do we boost this? How do we say anybody who wants to and can be working should be in the workforce? Being pregnant should not mean you can't, that you're not allowed to participate in the workforce. That should just be a very general American principle. So that was also recognized. There also was religious support from faith-based organizations who said, this is a moral obligation. We need to be taking care of folks when they are pregnant, when they are recovering from childbirth. It's just morally wrong. And it actually goes against the faith of a lot of these faith leaders when they said somebody is getting fired because they are pregnant or because they need to take care of their health. So there were quite a lot of reasons that we were able to get that bipartisan and really robust support from all different channels. I like to say it was really a nonpartisan issue. In many senses, it was a no-brainer, a common sense issue that, frankly, a lot of times when I talk to people, I would have to explain, wait, this isn't already illegal, because it was seen as just something that should be done.
Yeah. Yes. So have there been a lot of court cases or pushback against the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act now that is being implemented?
Yes, well, there was a very recent interesting decision that came down last month. So in Texas, the Attorney General of Texas actually challenged the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act very soon after it was passed, a few months afterward, and was not challenging it based on the merits, but was challenging the way that it was passed. So the way that the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was passed was, as happens many times now in Congress, it was attached to a large omnibus spending bill. It was actually the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023, and as was the Pump for Nursing Mothers Act. That's how they passed, all wrapped up in one big package. Due to COVID era voting rules, the members of Congress were allowed to vote by proxy, so that, if there were health reasons, if, obviously it was COVID times, but folks were not all gathering in person. So that act was passed using proxy votes, as many, many laws were. And the Attorney General of Texas said that this was passed unconstitutionally because there was not a physically present quorum of the members of Congress. This starts to get very deep into the weeds of constitutional law, but I will say there was a decision that then a lower court in Texas ruled, yes, we think this was passed unconstitutionally, and that was shocking. The legal scholars, the historians we spoke to, the legislative scholars all said, this is a completely shocking decision. It went up before appeal, and then what just happened last month is we won victory. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on a 2-1 that the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was passed constitutionally. So that was great.
Yay! I love hearing about a win. People, this is a double win. We have the win of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act passing when President Biden was in office, and then we have the win of the court upholding the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act most recently. That is fantastic. We don't have a ton of time left. What can people do to help make wins continue to happen and to be a part of a better balance?
Visit our website, or betterbalance.org. We have ways that you can get involved. You can get our action alerts. You can follow us on social media. And if you do need help in the workplace, you can call our free legal helpline.
Thank you so, so much. Now, before we close, other than the victory that you just mentioned, what's bringing you hope?
I'm getting hope from young people that we have been hearing from about how they're getting energized and are pushing for what they need, things like paid leave. That really gives me inspiration to see them fighting so hard for what they deserve.
Yeah. Yeah. Young people rising is incredible. And I love seeing the march of access to paid family medical leave coming from states passing it, state after states passing the policy, marching toward our United States Capitol, where it is no longer a question of if, but when we will finally have a national paid family medical leave policy and join pretty much every other nation on the planet Earth. Thank you so much for being on. Everybody, please become a member of A Better Balance, support A Better Balance, follow A Better Balance, and keep marching. Thank you so much, Elizabeth Gedmark.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for our show today. Thanks so much for tuning in as we tackle the top topics facing our nation in a way that requires the most boring disclaimer in the history of the planet Earth. Here goes. Views expressed on this show are those of the individual speakers and should not be attributed to Moms Rising, to this station, or to any news or social media service that may disseminate a recording of this show to the public or to any segment of the public. Boom! We'll catch you next week.